Okay, here we go. Benita Haberman and her story, Someday.
Oh boy.
You have probably all heard the adage, someday you will look back on this and laugh. Well, I know when someday actually is. My mother, Becky, was 33 when she got married in 1952. Back in those days, an unmarried woman over the age of 22 was already being labeled an old maid, a condition comparable to having a terminal illness. So, in a way, my mother was cured by the ending of World War II and the influx of Eastern European immigrants sailing into Ellis Island, because one of those ships had my father on board. Yes, in other words, my mother's ship had finally come in. Luckily, even at her advanced age, she was able to quickly conceive and deliver 2 healthy baby boys during the first 4 years of her marriage. But that's not the happy ending to this story, because life threw my mother a curveball, and somehow she connected with the bat and hit a home run. In 1960, 2 days before her 41st birthday, she gave birth to me, her only daughter. So the story begins anew. Since the only thing worse than being an old maid yourself is watching your only daughter turn into one. And that's where my story begins. I guess I thought everyone found a major and a man in college. When I graduated from the University of Illinois in 1982 with a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology and nothing else, I was at a loss as to what direction my life should take. I had no clue as to what kind of work I could do, and the job market in the early 80s was not exactly welcoming. So I took a secretarial job during the day, and I pursued my real career goal in the evening. I wanted the elusive MRS degree I didn't get at the U of I. Yeah, you heard me. I wanted to be a Mrs. somebody. I was looking for a man who would keep me in the style which I longed to become accustomed. Being a stay-at-home mom on the North Shore seemed like an ideal career choice. Most of the stay-at-home moms that I had seen while I was growing up looked rather content. So I began a multi-year expedition to the bars on Rush Street, accompanied by my girlfriends who were in the same boat as I was. But soon our wild weekends turned into laboriously long years of searching, with most of my friends hitting pay dirt and me remaining decidedly single. In 1990, as my 30th birthday approached, a feeling of dread began to fall over the nation, or at least Chicago. My mother, her friends, her large extended family, including the members of the Dorfman and Nordenberg Cousins Club, and the entire congregation of Ner Tamid Synagogue began searching for a man. Any man who would marry Becky's daughter. This led to hundreds of bad blind dates. His father's a jeweler. I gave him our home phone number. My mother's eyes twinkled like diamonds while describing this latest prospect. She had spent the week working with my aunt, who had an antique jewelry business. They set up a booth at some big international antique show near the airport. You can meet him for coffee, my mom said. His family's from Paris. They're Parisian. Ooh la la, I say. I'll be sure to order the French fries. When this man calls me, I remember thinking to myself that his accent sounded really weird, but I agreed to meet him at What's Cooking in Lincoln Village. While I'm standing outside the restaurant, a short, dark man approaches me, smiling and holding out his hand. Now, I don't know if the French have a look like the Italian or the Irish, but I do know that if they do, this is not it. Okay, so we're hanging out at What's Cooking, drinking tea, and I decide I'll casually ask him, so where exactly in Paris are you from? Paris? I'm not from Paris. I'm from Persia. I am a Persian. He was not exactly my cup of tea, so when the evening ended 30 minutes after it began, I went home and told my mother that she needed hearing aids and a map. Then there was the blind date with my mother's best friend's dental receptionist's son. Like I said, no stone was left unturned. I can still see myself looking out the front window of my third-floor apartment while talking to my friend Eileen on the phone to help pass time and, ease the anxiety of the unknown when I suddenly see him walking up to the front door and I scream, "Oh, good Lord, he has a mustache the size of Rhode Island." "Oh my God, what are you gonna do?" Eileen asked me while laughing hysterically. "What can I do?" The doorbell rings, ending the phone conversation and beginning one long night. I got in his messy car, which resembled his appearance. The black mass of hair under his large, wide nose and above his puffy lips matched the thick, black-framed glasses he was wearing. The glasses which reminded me of the ones that my brothers used to wear in the 1960s. I'm not a beauty queen, but this was more about grooming than actual looks. He had tickets to see Jimmy Buffett at Poplar Creek. As we struggle to make small talk during the long drive, he tells me that this is going to be about, the 100th time I've seen Jimmy Buffett live. Wow, you must really like Jimmy Buffett. "Oh yeah, the only ones I love more are the Grateful Dead." And I thought to myself, how I wished I was gratefully dead. Just as we arrived at the massive parking lot outside Poplar Creek, it begins to pour. I want to stay in the car, but no way is Mustache Man going to miss 1 second of this concert. So we run for what seems like miles in the rain to his coveted fourth row seats, waiting for our soggy asses. I spend the next 2 hours in drenched clothing listening to Jimmy Buffett expound on the virtues of living life on sunny islands. I've hated Jimmy Buffett ever since. I realize now my mother must have been suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome related to her own fears of dying an old maid. But what was my excuse for feeling that being single past the age of 30 was equivalent to a life sentence at San Quentin? Perhaps it was because that's all anyone ever asked me about, as my 20s were quickly evaporating before my eyes. "Hi, how are you? So when are you getting married?" When I gave the disappointing answer, most people were never content to just leave well enough alone. No, they would look at me pitifully and say, "I don't understand. You're a pretty girl." I often wondered if they were asking me a question or reassuring me that my single status had nothing to do with my looks. And I often wondered, what was I supposed to say in response to something like that? Maybe I should have said, maybe eligible men are looking for women who like to cook, clean, and have sex, and I'm really only interested in the sex. I guess I'll just have to keep looking for some superficial, horny guy willing to spend the rest of his life financially supporting me in a dirty house. I went out with a millionaire with green teeth, the bus driver from my cousin's daughter's summer camp, my own dentist's best friend, a guy dressed by his mother in Garanimals, and a former heroin addict, as well as many more I thankfully have blocked from my memory. But no matter how many times my friends told me, someday you'll look back at this and laugh, I could not find my sense of humor during those long years. In addition to all the bad blind dates, my job search included going to a lot of social events organized by groups like the Young Leadership Division of the Jewish United Fund. One of those programs, called LEADS, involved small groups meeting once a week for a month in members' apartments to discuss and learn all about JUF. It ended in a pitch to go on a trip to Israel with other hopeful, single Jewish people. They called the trip a mission. In my case, it turned out to be Mission Impossible. And I don't mean Tom Cruise. I knew two girls from my Leads group going on the 1992 summer mission, so I decided to join them. The timing seemed absolutely perfect, since it meant that I could be in the promised land during my 32nd birthday, far away from almost everyone who knew me. The last thing in the world I needed was yet another birthday surrounded by people wondering when or if I would ever get married. I imagined the trip to be a built-in traveling mega blind date. Maybe the man of my dreams would be on the same mission and we could fall in love before I fell into the Dead Sea. This trip was supposed to be the answer to my prayers. More importantly, it was supposed to be the answer to my mother's prayers. Her anxiety was now palpable. But when I got on the plane and quickly surveyed the group, I was reminded of the famous words, "The numbers never lie." There were 34 females and 16 males. I remember sitting in the back of the plane, reviewing the itinerary, and becoming hopeless on my way to the promised land. It turned out every minute of this mission is carefully planned from morning to night with speakers, sightseeing, and educational events. And out of the 12 days that we were going to be in Israel, there was only one free day where we could just go out and do whatever we wanted. And on that day, we would be in Jerusalem. But more importantly, ironically, that day was my actual 32nd birthday, July 12th, 1992. As the plane flew over the ocean, I decided that I would take my one free day and spend it alone so that I could wallow in self-pity at the Wailing Wall. After all, that's what they put it there for, right? The tour guides were fun, the sightseeing was memorable, and the weather was perfect. And on July 12th, 1992, 2 days before my mother was going to turn 73 and 32 years after she gave birth to her only daughter, who was still not married, much like she had not been married when she was 32, I covered my shoulders and sobbed against a wall, hoping I was in the one spot on this planet closest to God's mailbox. I shoved my note in between the cracks. That's what we Jews do. We write our deepest desire and prayers on paper, and then we hope the good Lord reads them and then moves heaven and earth on our behalf to provide the solace that we seek. When I returned home after the trip, empty-handed, I picked up just where I had left off, searching. One cold December night before 1992 was about to end, leaving me 1 year closer to being as old as my mother was when she finally got married, I dragged myself to yet another one of those Jewish social events. This one was at the Cubby Bear in Lincoln Park. You're never gonna guess what I found there. Mark Haberman! Looking remarkably just like the guy that I had described in the note that I had stuck in the cracks of the Wailing Wall 6 months earlier. On August 21st, 1994, a month after my 33rd birthday, and a month after my mother's 75th birthday, I got married. And that's how I know the exact date of someday.